You are standing in a crowded street in Edo. It is the summer of the year 1700. More than 1 million people live in the city around you. Look down at your feet. There is no open sewer. There is no brown river of filth running past the door of every house. The air smells of wood smoke and grilled fish, not of a city drowning in its own waste. Now picture London in that same year, a city less than half the size of the one you are standing in, where the gutters run thick, the Thames carries the dead, and cholera empties whole neighborhoods every few summers. Edo is bigger, Edo is denser, and Edo, by every honest measure of its age, is astonishingly clean. How is that possible? There are no great stone sewers beneath these streets. There is no pump house, no filtration works, no engineer with a grand plan. 1 million human bodies produce what 1 million human bodies produce every single day, and somehow it does not pile up, and somehow it does not sicken the city the way it sickens every other giant city on earth. Somewhere in Edo, all of that waste is going somewhere, and that somewhere is the whole secret. Follow it. Every morning before the shops open, men move through the alleys pulling wooden buckets on carts. They are not city workers, no shogun pays them. They come from the villages outside the city, and they have walked in for one reason. They have come to buy. That is the first thing that does not make sense. They are not being paid to haul this away. They are paying, in coin or in vegetables, for the right to take it. Human waste in Edo was money. The farmers of the Musashi Plain, the flat farmland ringing the city, had learned something that would take Europe another century and a river of dead to understand. Human waste, composted and aged, is fertilizer. Rich, concentrated, powerful fertilizer. And a city of 1 million people generates a mountain of it every day, for free, forever. To a farmer feeding that same city, it was not filth. It was the raw material of next year's rice. So a trade grew up around it, a real trade, with prices, contracts, and seasons. It even had a polite name. The Japanese called it shimogoi, which you can read as bottom fertilizer, or more gently, night soil. And the market for it was so serious that the price rose and fell like the price of any other crop. Here is where it turns strange. The waste of a wealthy household sold for more than the waste of a poor one. Think about why. The rich ate better, ate more, ate polished rice and fish and vegetables, and what left their bodies was richer for the fields because of it. Farmers knew this. They paid a premium to collect from the fine mansions of the samurai districts, and they grumbled at the thin pickings from the tenements of the poor. The daimyo estates, packed with attendants who ate well, were prize contracts. In a city obsessed with rank, even this followed the ladder of status. And who kept the money? Not always the person who produced it. In the great tenement blocks where most of Edo's common people lived, the landlord owned the waste of his tenants. It was written into the arrangement of the building. The rent you paid was low, sometimes shockingly low, and part of the reason was that your landlord was quietly selling what you left behind in the shared privy at the end of the row. In a good year, the night soil from a single tenement block could cover a real share of its running costs. Your body was paying part of your rent, and you may not have thought about it once. Now the mystery deepens, because a system this valuable was worth fighting over, and they did fight. There are records of disputes between villages over collection rights, arguments over who was allowed to buy from which district, complaints that middlemen were driving the price too high. When something is treated as garbage, no one guards it. When something is treated as treasure, people go to court over it. Edo went to court over its sewage. That single fact tells you how the city truly saw the stuff, not as a problem to be flushed away and forgotten, but as a harvest to be managed. And this is the part that should stop you. Look at what that one habit quietly did. Because the waste had a buyer, it did not sit in cesspits under houses. It did not seep into wells. It did not wash into the drinking water every time it rained. The thing that killed European cities again and again, human waste finding its way into human water, largely did not happen here, because in Edo, that waste had somewhere better to be. It was on a cart before dawn, heading out to the fields. The city was cleaned every single morning, not by law, not by machine, but by hunger for good soil. For most of 2 centuries, the waterborne plagues that regularly emptied the cities of Europe never took the same hold in Edo, not because the people understood germs. No one on earth understood germs yet. They stumbled into public health sideways, through a farmer's ledger, by turning the one thing every city fears into the one thing the countryside would pay for. And it wasn't only waste. Once you see this reflex, you see it everywhere in Edo. Almost nothing was thrown away, because almost everything had a second buyer. There were men who walked the streets buying used paper, which was pulped and made into new paper.
There were buyers of old cloth, of broken umbrellas, of candle stubs, of the ash from every cooking fire, which was sold back to farmers and dyers and bathhouses. There were menders who could fix a cracked ceramic bowl with a seam of lacquer, and menders who fixed the mender's tools. A broken thing was not trash. A broken thing was a job for someone. The modern historian Susan B. Hanley, who studied the everyday material life of this era, argued that ordinary people in late Edo Japan lived cleaner, healthier, and in some ways better lives than their counterparts in the West at the same moment, despite having far less of what we would call wealth. Not because they were richer, because they wasted almost nothing, and what a city refuses to waste, a city does not have to drown in. The Japanese have a word that still survives for exactly this feeling, Mottainai. It is the small pang you feel when something useful is thrown away before its time, the sense that waste itself is a kind of disrespect. In Edo, that was not a slogan, it was an economy. It was the reason a man would pay you for your ash, and a farmer would pay your landlord for the rest. Now, honesty matters here, because this channel is about the real past, not a fairy tale. Edo was not a city without disease. It was not paradise. Fires devoured whole districts so often the people grimly called them the flowers of Edo. Smallpox and measles still swept through and killed the young, and in the year 1858, when foreign ships had finally forced Japan's doors open after more than 2 centuries of near isolation, cholera arrived from the outside world and tore through the city, killing tens of thousands in a single terrible summer. The night soil system was clever. It was not a miracle. What it did was spare Edo the endless, grinding, everyday burden of filth-borne sickness that its European rivals simply lived with as normal, right up until the modern world came knocking with new plagues of its own. So here is the question worth arguing about, the one to leave in the comments. Who was really more advanced? The empire building steam engines and stone sewers while its rivers ran with cholera, or the city with almost no machines at all that solved the same problem with a bucket, a cart, and a farmer who understood the value of what everyone else called waste? Because the strangest part of this story is not that it happened, it is that we forgot it. For a long time, we told the history of progress as a straight line, machines and pipes and treatment plants marching steadily upward, and we quietly assumed that a place with no sewers must have been backward, dirty, primitive. Edo turns that story inside out. A closed loop where the city fed the fields and the fields fed the city, and nothing valuable was ever simply discarded, is not a primitive idea. Today, we have a fashionable modern name for exactly that ambition. We call it a circular economy, and we hold conferences about how we might one day achieve it. Edo was living it 300 years ago, in the dark, before dawn, one wooden bucket at a time. You can still feel the shadow of this. It is there in the almost startling cleanliness of Tokyo, a city of tens of millions with barely a public trash can in sight, where somehow the streets stay spotless. It is there in the elaborate care of Japanese household recycling, the sorted bags, the washed containers, the sense that throwing the wrong thing in the wrong place is not just against the rules but faintly shameful. It is there in that untranslatable little word, mottainai, that a Japanese grandmother will still say when you leave rice in your bowl. The next time you flush, and the water carries it all away to somewhere you will never see and never think about again, remember the men with the wooden buckets. Remember that a city of 1 million people once looked at the exact same thing you are about to discard and did not see waste at all. They saw next year's harvest. They saw money. They saw the reason their children would not drink the sickness their neighbors drank an ocean away. They saw gold, and they were not wrong.